Speaking of the Inasmuch House and the Haven of Rest Shelter, we have one of their board members with us right now, who also happens to be our state representative, Jim Haadsma. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Tim.
Good to have you here again.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks.
We'll have you up on the roof in our roof next Saturday, and we'll chat a little bit about all of that. But you've been on the board for a long time with the Haven of Rest and Inasmuch House, haven't you?
I think longer than 5 years at this point, and it's certainly a not-for-profit that has a great service to give to our community, and Inasmuch House, which you're going to be talking about shortly, is a very vital resource for women and families in our community who have become homeless.
Yeah, and I don't have to tell you, any community can be measured by how it aids its most vulnerable citizens.
That's true, and in Battle Creek we seem to have a crisis where we have a housing limitation or affordable housing limitation, which is why we seem to have many of these transient motels filled and some of the policing problems that evolved in relation to that. So we have to absolutely try to assure that those people have housing and food resources at the bare minimum.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I mean, they're just desperate. They'll go anywhere that they can. They've got children in tow, and so they end up at some of these motels where not everybody there is an upstanding citizen, so it's just a rough situation. So thank heavens we have Inasmuch House where people can go and take a breath and figure out where they're going to go next and how they're going to get the next job and how they're going to get money to put a down payment on a decent place and all of those things. So yeah, we'll be talking about that in great detail next weekend. Wanted to talk first, Jim, about the auto insurance bill. You supported it. The governor supported it. Pretty much it was a bipartisan effort to finally get some auto insurance. I guess it's an overhaul, of our old system. How do you feel about it right now?
The first bill that was presented back in early May, I voted against. That was the House bill. There too was a Senate bill. The Senate bill was overhauled ultimately by negotiations between the governor and legislative leaders in the House and Senate. I supported the bill that the governor with legislative leaders negotiated, doing so in the Friday before Memorial Day vote. I think this bill affords guarantee of rate relief. It does extend PIP choice, so that was part of a compromise between the governor and legislative leaders. And I think very importantly, it takes out of the pricing equation issues like gender and educational attainment and zip code. There still are, as is so in any negotiated resolution, a ways to go. There still are territorial zones which may be used to set rates. Credit scores cannot be used, but ancillary credit data may be used. So this is a good start. I'm confident that going forward with this hybrid of no fault, we'll have an opportunity to bring rate relief to citizens, and we're ensure that lots more people are driving with insurance than has been so to date, especially in places like southeastern Michigan.
Sure, and mentioning southeastern Michigan, the rates are much higher there, and we want to provide relief there so that more people will comply with the law and be insured. But at the same time, if it's a more dangerous place to drive and there's more traffic and more chance of accidents, then you could expect insurance companies would want to have different rates for southeastern Michigan.
Certainly, that is one of the variables that would be considered, the variable of traffic and significance of such. And I know for a fact from testimony that some of my colleagues from the Detroit area gave in May that it can be very unaffordable. Leslie Love, a state House representative, testified both in caucus and on the House floor about how she has a 2009 Saturn and it cost her around $9,000 or $10,000 to insure that 10-year-old car given the fact that she's in Detroit. So I'm hopeful that there will be some relief. And one thing that's very important is when we have this new hybrid no-fault law become effective on July 1st, 2020, everybody's got to be very vigilant about ensuring that they have the right coverage that's best for them, because it becomes a cafeteria-style manner of choice now in relation to PIP coverage.
Sure, and especially for our older citizens, I want to take a close look because they may already be covered under Medicare or Medicaid or health insurance, and be able to opt out on some of their auto insurance coverage, get the cheaper policy, but they want to make sure they do it right.
They absolutely want to make sure that they do it right, so their estates aren't subject to invasion by someone who sues them because of a car crash and they don't have the requisite coverage. I think one of the collateral issues in this case, and it's yet to be seen how this falls out, is what will happen with health coverage premiums, because if in fact people have an opportunity to opt out, the other question is, are there going to be increases in group health coverage premiums because of diminution in auto no-fault medical coverages?
Do we still have no-fault insurance then? I mean, or because you kind of alluded to it, if you get in an accident, somebody could sue you. Now, my understanding that in past years you kind of were covered under no-fault, went under the other person's policy, vice versa. But are we looking at chances now to be sued for liability that we didn't have a couple of weeks ago?
If you don't have eyes wide open when you make a decision about what your premium choices and coverage choices might be, yes, you could be. There's no question that this is not the 1973 no-fault law with which we've lived for 36 years. This is going to be a brand new world, and as I indicated, it's going to be important for everyone to take a look at coverages and not just elect the most bare-bone coverage, because one never knows when one is going to be in a car crash, and when you're in that car crash, you don't want to be sued and have your house taken by reason of a judgment in some kind of auto case. So yes, we still have no fault, but we have no fault choice, PIP choice.
Mitch Albom wrote an article highly critical of the new law, and a couple of points that he made. One was, well, we don't have the catastrophic for life coverage unless you buy that option now. You have the option of buying that or not, but we no longer going to have it like we did automatically before. And his article said, well, you know, we just gave away a great thing for $250 a year.
I read his articles. I understand his articles. In the trenches of legislative give and take, especially when the governor from my party has already made a deal with Republican legislative leaders, it's very difficult to make the argument that Mitch Albom made and not be other than a voice in the wilderness in that context. Only, to my recollection, 15 no votes in the Friday vote before Memorial Day holiday weekend. So I understand that. He has a valid point. What we gave away was choice declination. That is to say, now you have to make a choice. You have to have, as I put it before, eyes wide open when you're taking a look at what coverage you want, how much you're going to pay for it.
Well, and wallet wide open.
Wallet wide open, although there's a recent story in the Detroit Free Press, which is printed in today's Battle Creek Inquirer, that there's expectation that there's going to be, even for the same kind of relief, unlimited PIP coverage, there's expected to be more than 10% relief.
Okay. Well, that's a good, but one of Albom's points was, if you're going to have to pay to get that catastrophic coverage that you want, you're also looking at having to pay extra to make sure that you're protected against lawsuit for liability. And it's going to end up being, well, which one can we afford? And anybody who has any assets is going to want to make sure they're covered under the liability. They're going to spend their money on the liability insurance as opposed to the catastrophic coverage.
Yes, and as I've indicated before, it's really important to be vigilant about what coverage you have. We had a good no-fault law, but it's only as good as variables will allow. And I think that there has been evolution of fraud and people gaming the system. And as a consequence, what was well-intentioned in 1973 and what might work well if you look at the the No Fault Act of the Insurance Code, doesn't always work well when you got people steering clients to certain doctors and lawyers owning MRI centers and a lot of other stuff, which really is another factor for why Southeastern Michigan rates have been so high.
And in your recent newsletter, you say there's more transparency and accountability in this new law. So how do we get that? How did we get that?
Well, we're going to have DIFs, the Department of Insurance and Financial Services, be much more vigilant about what insurers are doing in terms of rate making. I'm hopeful that Catastrophic Claims Association will make open how much it has, so we actually know what the load, what the amount of money we have in that fund might be.
Now,
So
do we have that money, or do the insurance companies have that money?
that's a great question, and it's yet to be seen how this law is going to break out in relation to the consumer or auto insurers. But I think a reasonable argument might be made that the insurers seem to have a better first priority on that money than we do. So that's a very valid point, Tim.
Yeah, that's a little disturbing. State Representative Jim Haadsma is with us this morning. We're talking about the auto insurance overhaul bill. And when we had State Senator Dr. John Bison in here, he said a couple of times, well, we know it's going to need some tweaks. You also earlier in our conversation today alluded to, there are a couple of things that still need to be done. What are a couple of those?
Well, first, when this was presented to us on the Thursday before Memorial Day holiday weekend, we were given an opportunity to either stay there all night and take a look at language of a bill we hadn't seen yet, or come back on Friday morning and take a look at language that would be put together in the middle of that night. We chose to come back at 8 in the morning the next day. Still took much of the day on the Friday before the holiday weekend. We acted upon this around the 4 o'clock hour on the Friday before Memorial Day holiday weekend. And already there were some technical changes that were required. Keep in mind, this is a big swath of legislation. The first bill that presented to us was 82 pages long. So if one's putting that together by negotiations in the middle of the night and through a day, it's not surprising there are going to be some changes. But we already made technical changes in the week that we came back following the Memorial Day holiday break. So that's one indication of how things still need to be done over when there's a rush of let's get this done now. I want to tell you why I think there was a rush to do it now, in part, and that's because Dan Gilbert, the Detroit business person, was threatening some petition drive in relation to auto no fault, and the expectation was if we didn't come to some negotiated resolution, there could well be a ballot initiative in the 2020 year, and there could be not even hybrid no fault. You could have no fault at all and go back to the pre-1973 days. So I think we had to act as the governor and legislative leader suggested. I'd like to tighten up issues, and I think that's possible, like ensuring that rates aren't set by territory, which is relatively easy to do. So it's great to put up the flag and say, we won, we took away some non-driving factors like zip code. But if they could still, if the insurers can still bill by territory or territorial zone, that's not much of a great win. So I'm hopeful that we can take a look at those kinds of factors, non-driving factors, and do some more tweaking, as you put it, Tim. One other issue that I think is very important, I think hasn't been emphasized enough, among the non-driving factors eliminated was lapse in coverage. So that is to say, if a driver inadvertently fails to get premium paid on time, the premiums aren't going to skyrocket because of that lapse in coverage. So that's another way that the consumer is advantaged, and why we're going to have more drivers, because people can't have drivers with insurance. People can't have insurance if it becomes unaffordable because of a lapse in coverage.
Yeah, it's sort of like that the deal they struck down a while ago where they were just punitive fines and
driver responsibility fees.
Yeah, driver responsibility fees. Thank you. You know, yeah. We want to make sure that people comply with the law and get insured. And we've got an opportunity now for them to look at a, like you say, a cafeteria style menu where they can pick and choose. And needs to be some thought put into that. You know, that's something we never had to really do. You know, you bought your insurance, you were done. You never had to look at what was in it, or you know what types of coverage you had, because it was kind of a one size fits all for the most part.
Sure, and it's not pleasurable reading to go through proposed declaration sheet, but it's absolutely something that you would have wanted to do if you're ever in a car crash.
Right, yeah. State Representative Jim Haadsma, thanks again for joining us, talking more on this. We'll get to some more stuff. By the way, your coffee hours, if people want to come out and see you in person, I see you hold coffee hours the first Saturday of every month at Mr. Don's over on 20th. In Springfield from 9 until 11, and at Sterling Books and Brew, it's a cool place in downtown Albion, 1 to 3 in the afternoon. Is that also the first Saturday of the month?
Yes, and the upcoming time is the weekend following the 4th of July, so the 6th of July is the next opportunity, and we have a good time, and I buy the food and beverage, and it's a great opportunity to hear what people are thinking in our area and then on the east side of the district as well.
All right, so very good. Again, I wonder how they're coming on that. They got a nice lot behind a nice vacant lot right behind the store there. They're going to put in a disabled, handicapped, accessible ramp and maybe some benches and stuff, and work on that.
You check out Sterling Books and Brew?
Yeah.
I haven't been there since the first part of the month, but I look forward to having an opportunity to be there in the weekend after the 4th and having many people come and ask questions.
Jim, thanks. We'll talk to you again next Saturday from the roof at Sunshine Toyota. The roof set for Inasmuch House.
I look forward to that, and thank WBCK again for all its support of the Haven and Inasmuch House over the years.